as I bring you this morning's edition of Z Files. We're going to talk about the double sunset and perspective. That's right. The double sunset and perspective. Because people say to me, and I'm going to show you a clip, they say, hey, Z, if you watch a sunset and you have a drone, and then you could sit there and you could watch the sunset and you see the sun go down, then you take your drone and then you fly your drone up to elevation. Guess what? You'll see the sun again. So that proves that the sun went over the physical horizon. Z, see, you dumb flat earther, flurf idiot. And they'll say, Z, have you ever heard of the world's tallest building in Dubai? It's called the Burj Khalifa building. Of course you've heard of it, Z, Mr. Smarty Pants. It's the same thing, Z. If you're down on the first floor and you watch the sunset, if you get in the elevator and take it all the way up to the top of this world's tallest building, guess what? You'll see the sun again. So indeed, Z, when you watched it said originally, of course it went over the Earth curve and the physical horizon. Dumb flurfer. So, because I'm tired of hearing these things from you people. When I say you people, I don't mean that. I mean that in the most loving of ways. When I say you people, of course that's what I mean. I'm not, still a little bit frustrated that something that I see so obviously is completely occulted to like 99.99 repeating % of the population. No, I say it lovingly. Because there's a perfectly good explanation to why you can see this double sunset. And I assure you, it has nothing to do with a physical horizon. It has nothing to do with a globe. It has nothing to do with a spinning spherical Earth moving over 1,000 miles at the equator. No. It appears to just be simple perspective, guys. That's right, perspective. And with that, let's jump into the segment. As you allow me to pull up my graphics. I have graphics, guys. I'm not just here doing a bunch of bullshit. This is a professional show, a professional operation. Yeah, this guy in the chat, Isaac, says, it's called perspective. The sun gets further away, like you can zoom in and see ships that was invisible before. Thank you, Isaac. I appreciate your input. You're right on point this morning. Good for you. And, well, anyway, let's jump into it.
So I very rarely ever see being used to show the shape of the Earth as being spherical is this monstrosity right here, the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world, located in Dubai. The Burj Khalifa is so tall that you can watch a sunset at the bottom, take an elevator up to the top to the observation decks up there and watch it set again. It is so tall that you can watch the sunset multiple times. And there is no way for flat earthers to address this, because if the light was receding at a consistent rate, then the entire building should go dark at the same time. But because the Earth is curved, it takes longer, because of the altitude that this thing sits at, to see the sun go beyond the curvature of the Earth.
Well, first thing I have to say is nobody says globy like you there, good sir. The dead eyes, like the completely sheep-like indoctrinated glaze that your face evidences. But much love. We're not here for vitriol this morning. We're here for science, real science. Because as you say, there's no way that idiots like me could explain the double sunset scene here at the Burj Khalifa, world's tallest building in Dubai. Well, turns out, sir, that you're not completely correct. You're actually not correct at all. But we're going to get into it now.
With the explanation for that on a flat Earth.
So basically, this is going to be an this is going to be a some footage explaining the phenomena, or I should say, this is some footage that's showing the phenomena that this man uh, just talked about here.
Flat Earth. Why does it go below the horizon? I actually have a video I'd like to share if that's possible, if I could share a screen. Here's a video of drone footage of a sunset where at the observer height, you see the sun disappearing below the horizon, right? And then the drone rises to a higher observer height, and now that same sun is visible, and you get to see it set again below the horizon. So on a flat Earth, how would that be explained?
On a flat Earth, how would that be explained? Well, it's just Earth. And, well, he wants to know how it could be explained. Let's see if the dumb flurfs like me could explain it. I mean, we'll do our best. What do you see here, everybody? You see a cyclist on a road. Maybe a bridge, I don't know. And you can see he's moving into the distance, away from the observer, okay? I want you to notice the street lights. Look at the street lights. We're going to talk about perspective here. Look at the guardrails. My point is, due to the principles of convergence and the way that optics work in this realm, as things move into the distance, you see them converge into a center point, a focal point. You also notice the angular resolution and how it's affected as you move into the distance. Let's look at the guardrails. Firstly, the guardrails, we know, just because of objective reality, that when you're driving down a road, guardrails run along the road, which means they are parallel to each other. But what do you see here based off the perspective and the observation point of the observer? You see the guardrails appearing to come together and go down slightly. You see how they're going down? Look at the sides of the road. You see the sides of the road coming together, but they're appearing to go up. It's because relative to the observer's perspective, the guardrails are slightly above and the road is slightly below. Everything will merge towards the center, but things that are above the perspective of the viewer will merge down. Things that are below the perspective of the viewer will merge up. Even more so, we're going to watch the cyclist as he moves further away from the observer. I want you to imagine that the cyclist is the sun. It doesn't matter. It's an object moving away from the viewer. I want you to take a look. Notice this is a flat road, everyone.
Same phenomenon that we observe with ships going off into the distance and assumed to be going down a curve, when in fact we can see that his feet and wheels are now disappearing, but he is also being mirrored by the surface. So we have the surface mirroring half of that, and the actual rider still on the surface and being observed, even though we cannot see his lower half very clearly. And as he gets further away, there will be this kind of separation of the two, and we are left with just this top half that seems to be floating above this band of convergence or mirroring from the surface. And this, we will see in a moment, is what we actually see at sunset. We see the sun not going down below this apparent horizon of the surface.
Okay, so look, we can no longer see the bottom half of this man. We can't see his legs. We can't see the bike. Now, has this man gone below the geographical horizon of the straight road? No. We know the road is straight. Okay, you could say, Z, well, maybe it goes down a little bit. What, a couple inches, a foot? Already, 3 feet at least has now become occluded. We know this man has not disappeared behind the road. He's just moving off into the distance, plain and simple.
Surface, but we see first this mirroring, and then as it gets further away, it just disappears.
As it gets further away, it just disappears. But here's the part I want everybody to pay attention to, because this is the money shot.
Just like the cyclist. I'm going to raise the camera, and the cyclist will pop back into view, even though he's on a flat surface. There he is.
He raised the camera and the cyclist popped up back into view, even though he's on a flat surface. Does it remind you of anything? Does it remind you of the guy who said earlier that you can watch the sun set at the bottom of the Burj Khalifa building, and when you go higher, when you raise your perspective, you then see the sun again, just like we see here with the cyclist. Indeed, the cyclist did not disappear behind some geographical horizon. He didn't go below the road. He didn't go over the horizon. He went into the horizon. And then when the perspective of the observer was elevated, the cyclist then again became visible. Hmm.
Go around the corner to the left in a second. So this shows that giving ourselves a little extra height over a flat surface will allow us to see a sunset twice. We don't have to be looking down the curve of a ball.
With a little extra height, you can see the sun setting twice.
Sunset. Now with the camera zoomed in, everything does go black around the sun, and it looks like a black hole. And all the light is in the center of that black hole. So it ain't really a black hole, it's a light hole. And I put out a different video, and I think I called it Window into Heaven, and I actually showed this, but I didn't really even notice it myself back then. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put another arrow here. It was a little windy that day, but I waited till this video settled down a little bit, and I put another arrow here to show you where that actual horizon line is. It is there. So what you're actually seeing is the sun is shrinking into its own reflection, and nobody realizes this. Nobody sees this. Now, at the point that I put right about here, actually, is I used the zoom tool. I took that portion of the video from that point to the end of this, to this next transition, and I used the zoom tool, and I zoomed in on it, and I wanted to give you a close-up view and a slow motion view of that sun. Now this is the sun, and it's going to slowly disappear. It's going to do a magic act. It's going to do an illusion. It's going to deceive you, because it is going to disappear, but it's going to disappear into the atmosphere. Just like some of my boats that I show that get out to a certain point in the horizon, it disappears back into that mirage, that glass area, that mirroring area, that area that mirrors the sky. So again, I'm presenting this to you as my proof. And again, I don't expect anybody to believe me. They don't have to believe me. But this is what I see. So I've got this thing slowed way down. And this is what I want you to see, how this is working. And how where below this, you can see the visible water line. But up above that water line, you can tell that that is a mirroring of the sky. And this is mirrored from the top to the bottom. If you split that in half, it's just mirroring the sun slowly fading away. Now, I am not a professional photographer, but I think that my videos is going to prove to your own eyes what actually happens to the sun. It is a deception.
And this, we will see in a moment, is what we actually see at sunset. We see the sun not going down below this apparent horizon of the surface, but we see first this mirroring, and then as it gets further away, it just disappears, just like the cyclist.
So close, no matter how far. Couldn't be much more from the heart. Forever trusting who we are. Nice song. So I want to address a question by You Tell Me. Says, not a question, it's a comment. Says, I'm not convinced. And then you say, so many variables. That's the point, You Tell Me. There's so many variables. It's not about convincing you. It's showing you that, as you said, there are so many variables and options, because people will just rotely say, I see the sun going below the horizon. That's how I know it's a globe. Because they are failing to account for other possibilities. Once I show you that there's another possibility for what you're seeing, it no longer becomes a so-called proof of the globe. It debunks the proof. That's all I'm doing here, You Tell Me. I'm not trying to convince you of anything, nor should you be convinced of anything based off that presentation. But what you should know now is there may be another reason for what you see as a sunset other than what's being told to you. That's how logic works. That's how a reasonable mind works. Because they're telling you that when the sun is going down, it is indeed not the sun that's moving, it is you that are moving, relatively speaking. And not only that, that you're moving faster than the speed of sound on the surface of a spinning, rotating sphere. And that indeed the sun is setting below a geographic horizon. I'm showing you here that there is another option, an option that actually does not contradict all your senses and all your observations and all your experience in this world, because you don't experience a moving earth under your feet. You don't observe that. That's not demonstrable. I'm presenting a possible explanation that is much more in tune with the reality that you experience. But your indoctrinated mind, and I don't necessarily mean you tell me, because I know you're giving me the thumbs up and saying you understand. The indoctrinated mind will reject the evidence I just showed and defer to the consensus of authority due to the indoctrination that we have been under since our earliest times here on this earth. You were presented with a globe, a solar system, from as early as you could remember, through kindergarten, through cartoons, movies. So when the mind is presented with evidence that contradicts their pre-indoctrinated beliefs, they will choose to reject it. It's a defense mechanism. Call it cognitive dissonance, call it confirmation bias, call it whatever you want. It's a psychological defense mechanism employed by the mind of the individual to preserve the paradigm through which they view this world, which is really a preservation of their identity, an identity that has been defined for them through this control matrix. I'm simply showing you that when people say the only option for the double sunset, when you elevate, when they say the only option is due to Earth curve and a geographical horizon, I'm showing you another option, an option that is much more aligned with demonstrable reality. Graphic says, by your explanation, all you need to do is increase your elevation. You should be able to continually see this sun. Potentially graphics. There's a lot of potentials there. You have to realize that we're limited in our ability to see for multiple reasons. People will say, well, Z, if we live in a flat earth, wouldn't you just be able to see forever? You have to understand there's something called atmosphere. It's funny how they put a sphere in the end of it. Let's just call it atmos. There's air. Air is particles. In the air, there's moisture. There's dust. You can't just see forever because you're looking through air. I'll give you this analogy, graphics. You can see through a window pane, right? A window pane appears to be clear, transparent, but the reality is it's more translucent, because although you can see very clearly through one window pane, graphics, try taking 10 window panes and looking through 10 window panes lined up, see what it looks like. Then line up 50 window panes and look through that. Then line up 100 window panes, then 1,000. Here's my point. At some point, it would begin to become obscured, and eventually it would become opaque. You can't see forever on this earth because eventually your vision becomes obscured by what can be conjectured as the atmospheric deck of opacity. I stole that from you, Mr. Weiss. That term. At some point, it becomes opaque due to atmosphere. Now, to get back to your question, graphics, if you could potentially go high enough where the atmosphere becomes thinner, you may indeed be able to see it. Graphics, there is footage from the Go Fast rocket that was placed up some years ago. A bunch of amateurs sent up a rocket with a camera on it. An interesting thing happened when they sent that rocket up, graphics. The moon became visible at elevation. Somewhere maybe around 50 to 60, potentially 62 miles above the surface of the earth, the moon became visible. It was not visible, graphics, from the ground. It was a clear day. There was no moon in the sky. But at elevation, the moon became visible. Very interesting. And here's another interesting part, graphics. They were somewhere out in the American Midwest, Arizona, New Mexico. The moon at that time was visible above New Zealand and Australia on the opposite side of the supposed globe. So I ask you this, graphics. How was the moon visible on the opposite side of the globe? It's impossible. The moon became visible because at elevation, as you said, they were able to see further. thus evidencing the moon. Ladies and gentlemen, that'll do it for today's Z Files. Thank you for joining me as yours truly, with contribution to the rest of my compatriots in the so-called flat earth community, as we destroy all mainstream academia bullshit, as we challenge the control matrix that has been instituted for hundreds, if not thousands of years, as we break through their indoctrination paradigm and their social engineering, as we sit here, as we fight on the vanguard of what we see is truth, as they bring us step by step towards a state of despotic tyrannical control. Maybe some of us could still think, maybe some of you could still think, maybe some of you still care, because what I'm seeing more and more, graphics and others, and anybody who's listening, what I'm seeing more and more is a population who is not in any way concerned about truth whatsoever. I see people choosing a fantasy over reality because it's comfortable and it's safe.